it's a real privilege and an honor and a blessing to have Jerry Cooper with us today. Jerry is a local orthopedic surgeon with Fort Wayne Orthopedics. His specialty is sports medicine, which I just recently found out. So I was asking him which teams he's worked with here in Fort Wayne, and he told me the Mad Ants, among other things, and worked with the University of St. Francis football team until recently. But he does a lot of arthroscopic surgery. In fact, on a lot of my friends, seems like every time I turn around, he's operating on somebody I know. And so far, I've not heard any complaints, so that's great. His educational background, he did his undergraduate work at Butler University in Indianapolis, med school at the IU Med School in Indianapolis, residency at Louisiana State University, and then a fellowship at the Orthopedic Specialty Hospital it says Murray, UT, what is that? Oh, Utah. Okay. I'm thinking, I came from Knoxville, and whenever I see UT, it's the University of Tennessee, so I blanked for a moment. But he's a member of a number of medical societies, the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine, the Fort Wayne Medical Society, Indiana State Medical Association, Fort Wayne Orthopedic Society. But he's also a member of Sunrise Church here in Fort Wayne, which is the church that I attend, and has been a real important lay member of that church and leader in the church. And the reason he's here today is to not talk about his medical practice per se, but his heart for missions and what he's doing in Kenya, his missionary work there, which really is an extension in many ways of Sunrise. We see it as a part of our ministry. So he and his wife Alex have been a member of Sunrise for a long time. They have 3 children, Trent, Caroline, and Luke, married 27 years, and as I said, really important members at Sunrise. So without any further ado, let me ask you to welcome Dr. Jerry Cooper.
I just appreciate the time to come out and just give you a little bit of where I got to and how I got there and what we've been doing for the last couple of decades over in Kenya and East Africa. And there's no question that it was a gradual process that built up, and even before we started going, just that tug and that call as it came along. And I'll try and speak to some of that at the end of this. But yeah, it wasn't something I just was wired for and just went and did. But as I went through my training, I would have told you when I was in undergraduate, I wouldn't have ever seen that. And even when I was going through medical school, the idea of traveling somewhere else and doing something wasn't high on the list. But as I came back into my practice here in Fort Wayne, then some of those things started popping up, and I don't know when for you people that might be. It's different for everybody, but my father and then my mom with him had gone on a couple of mission trips and got to do some medical, and they were going over to India. And I just remember I'd actually sort of dipped my toe in the water one time on one of those just gathering informational sessions for a trip. And I was thinking, I don't know what I would be able to contribute, because it was just, they were going to go to India and they were going to do some medical work, and I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and we didn't even train that much doing all the conservative splinting and things like that, which I thought you would have had to do to go to maybe a third world region to practice. And I can just wholeheartely tell you that's not the case, and there's things that you can do. But as a result of that, I didn't. My kids were small, and so so I approach people all the time about joining us, and all the reasons, excuses if you would, but reasons to not to go, I had those, and they're all valid. Young family, young kids, leaving, going away. What am I going to do? How am I going to contribute? And that changed around 1998. So Ben already spoke to some of these things. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, as he already said. I trained, did undergrad at Butler, then went to IU Medical School. Decided I wanted to go into orthopedic surgery, so I went to New Orleans and LSU hospital systems and did all my orthopedics down there, and then went out to Salt Lake City for my fellowship. And that was an extra year just in training in arthroscopic surgery and sports medicine. I'm originally from Fort Wayne, Roanoke vicariously. My father was a family practice physician for 40 some odd years there, and had a great influence on me, not only from a medical standpoint, but also just from a life standpoint. So I can't speak about this whole experience, this whole issue without talking about Daniel Oladipo, because really everything that's happened over these last couple of decades we've done together, and we are about as close in age and life experience and things like that, except we just went to, as you heard, we went to two different grade schools together, him in Kenya and me here. And we've become very, very good friends through the years. And Daniel is originally from Kenya, is a Kenyan national, and you hear a lot now with the news and the political environment, but with regards to immigration and visas. But he actually was awarded a lottery visa, which you could sign up for in certain countries. So you just get your name picked out of a hat, and you got a chance to come abroad and study. And even though he had a wife and a daughter at that time still, it becomes the chance of a lifetime. So he took that lottery visa, and it landed him over in Columbus, Ohio at Capital University to further study sports medicine. Back home, he had done medical training, and they have a little bit different system there. There's a medical school university, but there's also a medical training college. And I don't know, the equivalency of that may be more like our mid-level programs, PA, NP programs in comparison. So that's sort of where he was equivalent, but he practiced back in Kenya. When he came over here and then studied, he sort of got shut out by his system. I'll speak a little bit about Kenya here in a second, but their system is just like ours, is filled with political rife, but it's also very tribal, and if the tribe in charge is not affordable to you or does not agree with you, then you might, so long story short, he got shut out and stayed here. And so he ended up working a bunch of different jobs, but one of those jobs just happened to be as an orderly at our surgery center. So one day, I don't know, around 1997, he just approached me about doing something. But I've seen him do this multiple times through the years, and our typical American response is, yeah, that sounds good, sure. Well, in other parts of the world, people take that to be, that's your word, so, oh, you'll go then, right? And I just remember doing that with him, and I can remember the time, the place, the moment, the area, the hallway that I said that, and something else different clicked. And it was just after those earlier experiences I told you about, where my parents were going off to India, and I thought, maybe not, maybe so. All of a sudden, there was something here that was different. It was about doing orthopedics. So I still had young kids and a wife and family at home, and so I decided to take the tactical approach, and I just invited him over for lunch instead of, let somebody else deliver the message and everything. So he came over to lunch to our house one time and started talking about it. And to my surprise, my wife actually said, well, yeah, that may be okay. That sounds all right. So from there, then it had the okay. So a couple of green lights, and then we went off with it. Presently, after many years, Daniel, since he did his training, he went to St. Francis, got his surgical technician, became a surgery tech around here for many years, and then became a first assist. And Ohio's opportunities are different than Indiana's opportunities. He moved to Cincinnati about 8 years ago, and since there has lived down there, and he's still involved in many things, and we're still very close. And he's the president down there, the leader of the Kenya Cincinnati Association, And one of the many influences he had is that the fact that they were there, and my father has a past history at the UC, but my daughter ended up going there, and so it got to be sort of a second coming to them getting to reunite and sort of be a second family to her down there. So kudos to him. I just wanted to bring him up in this process. Kenya is in East Africa, so it's on the other side of the world. There's no direct flights from the U.S. to there. You have to go through somewhere. Typically, you'll go through Europe to get there. There was talk when President Obama came over 2 years ago to Kenya that they might get that going, but I don't see that happening in the present environment with all the concern about terrorists and just security checks. So usually you go through London, Amsterdam, Paris, somewhere like that. Again, not knowing a lot about it until I got over there. Kenya is one of the more stable areas in that part of the world. As you can see, they're surrounded by South Sudan and Somalia and Ethiopia. Uganda's stabilized through the years. Tanzania is a very stable country, but Kenya becomes the jumping off point for all of East Africa for pretty much anything, and whether or not it's our brothers and sisters that are in the mission field or mission organizations. Most everyone has an outpost in Kenya. It's actually has a hospital there that became the model mission hospital, which is called Tinwick, that some of you may have heard through World Gospel Mission. That it's out in the southwestern part of the country, but so there's a long and deep history there. And surprisingly, I'll run into places there, even outside of Nairobi, in places that have attachments or had startups from people, in the Marion area or the Anderson area. Just a lot of mission influences has come out of Indiana to there. But it's also the stable place for a lot of non-government organizations, wildlife funds. Anything is pretty much there. Presently, as you know, you read a lot about it. They still have an environment that is apt to some terrorist activities, influences mainly out of Somalia and that part of the country. They still are on that verge. They're in the third world realm where there's a lot of conveniences and modern things, but there's absolute still just the things that you would see in your National Geographics about Africa there. But it's a beautiful country. It's a country with a diverse ecosystem, anywhere from going down on the coast where it's just that, it's a coastal area, all the way up to mountains. Kilimanjaro is just across the border in Tanzania, but Mount Kenya is in the center of the country. And there's actually some snow on that, even though the equator runs right through it. You can go from arid parts of the country to lush parts of the country to savannas to hills and mountains and forests. And it's just it's a really a neat area. And there's an area that runs through it called the Rift Valley that you've probably studied through the years, and some of those whole anthropological finds and things like that through the years. So that's it. So that's where we go. And again, when I first signed on to say, okay, let's go do that, I had no idea where we were going. I'll show you some of the pictures here. So I wasn't sure whether or not we would be, what kind of where would we stay, how would we work, what would we do. But hopefully you can get a feel for this as we go on. 2 languages, 2 national languages, English and Kiswahili. Most everybody will speak some Swahili, but there's hundreds of tribal languages, so everybody knows their tribal tongue. Usually they know the neighboring tribal tongue, then Swahili, and if they've gone to school, then English. So they're way more diverse in their languages than any of us, which is always typical for us versus everywhere else in the world where everybody else speaks other languages, but we don't. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some of the things that we've been doing and just give you a sort of a snapshot on some of those, and then I'll be happy to answer questions and then speak to some of the other reasons as we move on. But I just wanted to give you some of the things that we've been doing. So in 1998, we started up with the Orthopedic Project, and I think I already said this. I said, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll go, and see. But I really didn't plan on it being any more than just a single trip, and check that box and mark that off the list of things to do. Even though I felt a call to go do that and wanted to go do that, I didn't see it as anything in a long-term manner. So that's actually a picture from the first year, and that's a typical setting where one of us or them will be doing things and people will be crowded around. So we really see it as an instructional type time to do things. So through the years in the last couple of decades, we've taken multiple teams. I don't even keep count of I've lost count of the times I've been there, which have been multiple, and I've lost count of the number of people that we've been able to take over with us on these teams. Our focus, as we've done this from the get-go, was to go and teach. It wasn't to go and do. So some medical mission trips are to go displace, transplant our way of doing things to that spot, do our thing, and leave. Our approach on this has always been to go and teach our colleagues, interact, do some things, but try and transfer that our gifted knowledge, our things that we've been given through the years, over to them. So it's been didactic and clinical, and then also a lot of transfer of technology. So if we can bring things that might be available here but not there, or very limited availability there, we've been able to bring things over through the years. And again, I wouldn't even begin to have a list long enough to list or to place out the people and the companies and the organizations that have given to us through the years to help with that. But it's been numerous. And when we first went, we actually were able to get some donated implants, and we still are able to do that now. It's just the regulatory environment changes through the years, and we have to adapt to that, so we adapt to that accordingly. And then we spend time gathering equipment through the years, and my office is always full of stuff, so at my place of work it's become a joke. So stuff gets accumulated. We have a barn, we transfer it to the barn gets accumulated. My wife goes out to the barn every few months, and then what's all this? And then we have to figure out something to do. I call Marvin, then once I do that, we're in trouble because he's going to access a bunch of stuff, and then we send a container. And that's sort of how that whole process works. But as you all well know, those of you in the medical area, it's just such a wasteful, our whole medical system is so wasteful in terms of things we use and do, and it just, there's good stuff, but it becomes outdated in a short period of time accordingly, or doesn't get reused. So there's a lot of things that can be used over and over again. That's a picture oversight of Kenyatta National Hospital. That's in Nairobi. So Nairobi is the capital of Kenya. That's the main teaching hospital for East Africa. Having never been there before until I showed up, it's just a huge structure. It goes up about 10, 11 stories, and has all of the training programs for the country. There's another main teaching hospital in country on the other side, which actually Indiana University School of Medicine has some association with, but not here. And what was again some of the confirmation on this whole call, and when we showed up, here it is. This is the place, and I've already told you about all the organizations that come, but and all the missions that had happened out in country, but no one had ever come to here to do this project and everything. Since then, some others have, but so it was just a unique opportunity to be able to do that one would not have thought would have been the case. So that hospital is a huge place. It's a referral center, so not only from within the country, but even the surrounding countries can try and get people there. But it's still a fairly indigent hospital, so people of means wouldn't necessarily go there, even though that's where all the training comes. And there's probably equivalencies of that in our system too. Presently, I'll speak to this in a second, but presently there's a doctor strike going on in Kenya. So this hospital, even though it takes care of thousands of people a day, is sort of paralyzed. There's no doctors working. Staff is, but so there's not much getting done. So just adjacent to that, just off to the side here, is the University of Nairobi Medical School, and they actually have a department of orthopedics. So again, things I didn't know when I first went, but the medical school is adjacent to that. They use that as their training hospital, and within that medical school, there's a department of orthopedics. So there are a few orthopedic surgeons who have trained and apply the craft in country. But the things that we were going over to do weren't things that were typically being done. And usually that system works that they'll train here, and then they'll go off. Most of them would go off to Great Britain and do observational things, and then come back. And I think much of the ability to become what they become probably came through literally the practice of medicine through the years. So those people have become great colleagues and friends through the years in that department, and we worked with them quite a bit. This is just a side view of the hospital. Again, just giving you an idea. There was an old English hospital there called St. George's. I'm actually standing over by that where I'm shooting this picture, and then after many years, then probably IMF or World Bank funds came in, and some of those went towards this hospital. So it does have the structure to be able to do things, but it's depleted of any equipment. So it's very hard for them to get equipment and things that they would need to do their things. But it's structurally, it's a very interesting place. So like I said, we've taken multiple teams through the years. I'm just showing you one of those teams. What I would typically do is just like we do anywhere. I'll just go ask, and some of it would be people we work with, but also it'd just be people that get the word out and try and find out if anybody's interested in going. There's a lot of people that are interested in going and don't necessarily get connected, but I would also try and push it out to the other side of town and the other orthopedic group, and I would ask those guys to go, and I've asked retired docs to go. Some of them are in this picture, and then we'll try and get nurses and surgical techs to come. It's always a great assistance. And then I think even on one of these trips, on that trip, we even took a biomed person, which was very helpful because of some of the things we had there. Our teams have been as small as 2, that would be Daniel Odipo and I, versus as big as 12 or so. As you know, there's been years where I'll even go say, except for maybe the first year, every year that we've traveled, there's a travel advisory and warning, but that's always the case. So that was in May. Well, not that trip, but the first year we went was May of June of 1998, and that August is when Al Qaeda blew up our embassy over there. So it was just right before that, and that's when everything started. Everything started going from there. It seems like. I mean, just that day they blew up an embassy in Nairobi, and they blew up the embassy in Tanzania, and that's sort of when it got a little bit of a play here. A lot of people didn't hear it very much until 9/11, and then people started tying the dots back. So anyhow, so with those travel advisories and warnings, it's been difficult through the years to get people to go, but we've always ran a very tight ship. We run, I know you guys have done it, overseas missions, and we just try and keep things under control and just not let anything happen. So we try and regulate our team and sort of set boundaries. And what people don't understand is that it's not just about them. It's that if something happens to somebody, it messes us up for the long haul. So that's why we just ask them to give up your control of what you're going to do. Stay contained. We don't let people run off by themselves. We don't let people go off doing something. We don't let people go to town or something like that. We just stay within, and through that, we honestly have not had an incident in 20 years, which has been a huge blessing for us. Even illness, every year people get sick just from the food or the water or something. But except for one incident where somebody had a little bit of an anaphylactic reaction, we had to take them to the hospital, but made it through. Nobody's had any serious problems, and it's just pretty typical for somebody for the team to miss a day of work in the 2 weeks that we go over. That's the other thing. So we would typically set up to go for 2 weeks, and that's always a difficult time to convince somebody to go for, but you sort of need that amount of time to get up and going and do what we do. So what we do right after we get there, we usually get there at about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Next day we'll go into the hospital. So our colleagues who are the orthopedic surgeons will have already been screening patients and triaging patients and knowing what it is that we're going to concentrate on for that year's mission trip. They call it a project, so I always call it the project. So that year's project will be focused in on certain things. And those first few years it was always for knees. So it would be the knee project. So that's what it would be talked about. So they would gather patients with those specific problems. We did not go over and try and knock out their trauma, because trauma is constant. It's just a constant faucet, ongoing. Road traffic accidents and all kinds of other things. The trauma, we didn't go to do that. That was going to be something they were just going to continue to do. But what would happen is then the hospital would dedicate 2 or 3 rooms for the project that week, and then we would work there. So we'd go around triaging patients, and again, both clinical and didactic. So we'd spend time with our colleagues, not only just seeing the patients and evaluating and saying, yeah, we could do this or recommend that, but we would interact and go over their studies and just talk. And it's a great opportunity to interact. And what you find out, even though there may be lack of technical training or lack of technical supplies, the knowledge base is very high, and their knowledge base is equivalent, and sometimes they kick us out. I don't say that. I mean, they beat us and stuff. In terms of they know way more and stuff. But it's just a fun time to interact with them and get to meet patients. And obviously, there's a lot of translation that sometimes goes on in these sessions. And this is a typical ward upstairs at that hospital where patients will be put in the middle. Sometimes they're on mats on the ground. When it becomes real crowded, they'll double up in beds and put one's feet this way and that way, and just to maximize the space. And I have absolutely no idea what's going on right now there, because this is a trauma ward right there. And the trauma has to just, as like I said, it flows in every day. But for the last 2 months, since early December, they've been on strike, and nothing's happened in the hospital. So I don't know what's going on. There's kids. There's a pediatric orthopedic ward. We've done some work with pediatric orthopedics through the years, but not as much as an adult. But just giving you a picture of some of those guys. So usually what they'll do is dedicate a ward for the project and bring those patients in, and then in a day or in a morning we'll go through and triage out those patients and decide, and off of that for the next 2 weeks we'll typically have plenty of operative load to take care of for that time period we're there. But what happens is once, especially after 2 or 3 years of doing this, once we hit town, word gets out and people will they'll start showing up, or somebody in the background who knows somebody will bring them around, and we'll be seeing patients pretty much every day back behind the surgery area and such. So it just becomes interesting. And usually the day before we get ready to leave, there's something that we've been wanting to do. Somebody shows up and it's like, where were you? But that's just typical. And then unlike here, we say, well, we'll be back next year. And there's a much more acceptance of time and delay than us as Americans would ever accept. You know, it's like, okay, well, I'll see you next year, you know, and do it. Like I said, there's a political system. The administrators for the hospital are political appointees. They change all the time. Seems like every year or two. So we spend time meeting with them. Again, I did not know when I went there that I was going to have to become a speaker and a negotiator. But we literally spend time negotiating with the administrative people in order to do cases. I know it sounds crazy, but we have to work to get them to, even though they've approved the project and thing, we have to work with them to be able to do that and to negotiate so that they're letting the patients in so that we can take care of them. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's just the way it is. And this is just one of the administrative meetings that we would have after we get there and with the team. And but always very much more formal than we are here in terms of meetings. They have that British system within them, and so everything is much more timed out in terms of speaking. It's just not a natural, you don't speak until it's your turn to speak. And even if there's people at odds with each other, I'll just say this, their culture is much better about this, and that when they come back together, it still go through with each of them shaking hands and being civil and kind. As I said, we spend a lot of time in the didactic portion of it, so we'll always be teaching whenever we go. And this is actually a lecture room over in the medical school. So we'll speak to medical students. We'll also speak to their version of residents, which are registrars, so those in training. And then we'll also spend time later at night, usually outside of there, with our orthopedic colleagues and have lectures. But this is an example of those lectures, and again, a little bit different. Their system is one where questioning or challenging is not as accepted. So we always have to get the students and the registrars to let them know it's okay, challenge us on that, ask questions, and bring it out. But we'll also ask the people that we take. So the nurses and the techs will always say, this always freaks them out. Usually don't tell them until we're on our way usually. So say, hey, by the way, we're going to ask you to give a couple talks. And they don't think they can do it, just like we all think that you can't get up. How am I going to get up in front and talk? What do I know? We get them to do that by just setting them down, and then they talk, and questions and answers and things. So that's a couple of nurses we took that year's trip, and it's always so meaningful. It's very helpful, and sometimes the most grateful people on the teaching sessions are those in the technicians or the nurses, and just really appreciate somebody spending time to go over what their knowledge base and talk about what they know and their things. This is just another room, and we'll do these. Sometimes we try and do it in the morning before we get started. Their time, their concept of time is a little bit different than our concept of time. We'll try and say we're going to get together and start working at 8 o'clock. That usually is around, by the time we get around, by 10 o'clock, hopefully we can start a case. we'll meet for a lecture in the morning. So we'll try and get there early and give our lectures. So these are the surgery techs. Daniel's one of them. They're lecture, giving them a talk. While one of the docs over talking to the registrars in a different area, usually over at the medical school. And we'll try and do that. And then, like I said, sometimes during the course of the day, we'll do the same. And always well received and well attended, and just a good way to again act out and get our things done. This is old style lecture hall in the medical school. We'll do grand rounds a couple of times while we're there, and this is just one of those sessions. So that'll bring together everybody in the seating. So then we'll turn to the operating room theater to also teach, and like I said, we didn't go to just go and do cases and see how many we could do, although we do like to push and get as many cases done so that we can spend time working with our colleagues and interacting and showing them how we do things, and then much of the time they're doing it though. So it's an instructional tutorial surgical intervention as we go through these, and then everybody else around will also be there. And just like here, as the later the day goes or the more inconvenient the time, a more junior staff person may be working with you as opposed to the senior staff. Like I said, we've mainly focused on adults through the years. We've done some kids cases, and it depends on who we have going. So if we have somebody with an expertise in pediatric orthopedics, then we'll do some of that. If not, and it's somebody that just does shoulders, then we'll do that. But we try and tailor our cases and expertise to what it is they want to do during that project session, and they're usually pretty good about letting us know. The things that we've done through the years have been, like I said, knees. So we've done knee arthroscopic surgery, and that's basically the sports medicine side of it. We've always wanted to try and get injured athletes in, because over there, if a guy plays on they have a league, they have a soccer league, just like the bigger countries do. One of those kids gets injured, has a simple meniscus tear, they don't have any means of getting it taken care of, and their career can be over, just like that. So Daniel, before he came over to the U.S., he worked with one of the big clubs, soccer clubs there, and was sort of their head trainer. So he has a good connection with that. So we're always trying to get those young men and women in from the different athletic fields, because that was Daniel and I's interest. So we've done a lot with arthroscopic surgery through the years, which involves a lot of equipment and things that just wasn't readily available, that we brought and have continued to bring through the years. We've also done knee replacements, although it seems like too much for a third world country. It really is a huge need, and the patients that you'll see there have end-stage disease that I would never ever see here to the extent and deformity. So we've done knee surgeries there, and actually sort of introduced that into the country, and now it has become a common surgical intervention there through outside or even in this hospital. So they've learned how to do it, and it's become a thing. We did a lot of spine surgery early on. We took some orthopedic spine surgeons with us. As that's evolved, we no longer do that in our project. There's a separate group that actually has come and sort of taken that over out of California. So hopefully we led the fire on that. We've done some pediatric surgery, we've done some deformity surgery, we've done some hand surgery through the years. Most recently, a bunch of what their emphasis has been shoulder surgery, and so that's where we've been heading through the years. And that's a typical situation where the table will be surrounded by a bunch of their surgeons, and one of us will just come in and sort of help out or guide or just talk through it as we're doing the cases, and that's how it's become a typical situation on a knee surgery or something like that. And the people have been very kind to us, and again, I always emphasize to the team that we're not here to bring our system to them. We're here to work inside their system, and so I always try and emphasize that. Undoubtedly, all of us want to institute our ways and our means and our system into theirs, and people get frustrated and they want to change things. And I always have to have, so we usually have breakdown talks at the end of the day with our team and just say, no, this is the way they do it, and it's okay, and we'll work within that and try and get to the same end point. As I mentioned earlier, and as some of you know, we have sent equipment out of Fort Wayne through the years, and this is a container that was actually, I think at one point in time, parked outside my barn that's sitting behind the hospital, and it had been dropped off but hadn't been opened yet, and so Daniel and I got there a couple of days early just to open the contents of that, and what we'll typically do is we'll fill a portion of a container with medical supplies and equipment that wouldn't otherwise be able to be gotten there. You can't stick it in a suitcase and fly along. And we'll get those things over, but we'll usually add in as much as we can for all of our mission partners, which I'll speak to here in a minute. So for the different ministries, there's other things that we try and get over. And it again becomes very difficult in their regulatory environment, where you would hope that something that's being donated or being sent over would just clear through. That is not the case. It becomes a huge hassle. It becomes very expensive. Even right now, there's a drought going on throughout the country. It's a dire situation, and even getting food in right now is difficult. We have a container that I think has arrived in the port, and just getting it through without duty and taxes is probably not going to happen, but it's enough that it's causing some of our mission partners like Feed My Starving Children to reassess what they want to do. So even though it's helping the people, again, just like anywhere, government regulations, unnecessary holdups cause problems. I can also tell you we had a whole container one year taken and pilfered, and we never ever saw the stuff. So there's certain challenges. So we presently are working with a ministry partner there. I'll show you a picture of him here in a little bit to help us with some of those things. So I'm gonna switch off and just tell you then. So we did the orthopedic project the first year, and I told you I thought I'd be done and just go in one time. What happened then is there was so much confirmation on that by the time I was still on the ground there that I knew we were going to return, and I committed to that. So we started going back, and it just hasn't stopped. And then after a couple of 3 years of that, we started getting other queries about things. So one of the things that came into play was Sunrise is the United Methodist denomination, and one of the schools here, the United Methodist Church in Kenya, was very young. The Methodist Church out of England was there, but the United Methodist Church was young. So we got a invitation to just come visit, and this is probably it's in the outskirts of the city within it. It's a huge city. It's hard to get around. Probably takes us about a half hour or so to get there, but we went out there and visited their church, and they'd started a primary school. And primary school had a few students in it, and we, long story short, we decided to partner up with them. So since about 2001, we've partnered with the people at Kaioli. That's an area there. And that school has now grown to 375 kids in this small area. I'll try and show you some pictures of it. Education is the sort of the British system, primary school, basically preschool to 8th grade, and then after they do that, they have to take national exams, get accepted on, and then they get graded on what type of secondary school they qualify for, and whether or not they even go to a secondary school. But this is just the primary school. So this was just from this past October, this picture here. This is sort of what the size and the amount of kids. And that area you're looking at, that is the school. There's just like 8 classrooms around there that some of them are subdivided to be able to try and handle the load of these kids. And this, even though I thought I was going over there to do medical mission work, I've found myself, I've become a school person. I've become an educational mission person, I think, because this is where more of my time and effort lands than anything. And there's challenges just in this that we could talk about for a couple hours. Desks and things are pretty rudimentary, but get made, and school supplies, books, things like that become very valuable, but get shared. Even though the country has, quote, free primary education, a school like this does attract many students, and our students are not of means. They come from the slum area or just adjacent to the slum. Most of the, I'll even go say, a bunch of the kids in our school are refugees. So they're refugees from the Congo. The Congo's been under civil war for years. It gets no playtime. It gets no publicity, except if you run the Fort for Fitness, and there's a church in town that cares about it. But otherwise, you won't see much about the DRC. But a bunch of the people that have been displaced there for some reason have come to this area, so they don't have any means to pay for. So it's always been cool to me that even though our church has helped come alongside this school, and we haven't really done that much from a financial standpoint, just help them out a little bit. But they've then come alongside refugees in their community and take those kids in, and so they speak a totally different language, and it's just a very neat situation, but challenging. Some of our students, and that was just from this past October, and our church and our founding pastor has since passed away, had started a thing called Life Change Project, and they're part of it. So even though our congregation doesn't know them in whole, they all know us, our congregation. So it's really good. So out of those things, and I told you we started getting requests and invites. What I never realized is that if you open yourself up to these things, you know, and you say, you know, yes to that knock at the door from Christ, then other things, there's this huge web of stuff out there that is totally invisible to you until you start experiencing one thing and you experience something else, and there's just a enormous amount of opportunities for us to be involved. So some of the ministry partners that I never knew until after I'd already been going there. I started going there to Kenya before I started going to Sunrise. Within a year or two, I find out that some of the people sitting in our congregation are Campus Crusades missionaries to that part of the world, and that's Marvin and Cindy Bozard. And they also have a separate organization that helps us to transfer some items through, and that's called Life International. And honestly, when I say we, Daniel and I wouldn't be able to do what we've done through the years without their help and assistance. So they're key. They're our main people that we interact with. But what's cool about it is that then when they're not there and we're over there, we're able to do some of their work. So we sort of feed off of each other, and some of you in here know Marvin, and so he and I have become cantankerous friends through the years. But Cindy's the brains, and she's the smart one and the organizer. So she's the one that helps get the things really done. But he's a dot connector. So it's really cool. So through them, Cru and GAIN, they presently sort of switched over into the humanitarian arm of Campus Crusade, which is GAIN. They help with their mobilization, getting things over. And then Feed My Starving Children, they have great contacts through that and have been able to mobilize food containers. And like I said, we have a food container sitting at the port right now. And then Samaritan's Purse, again, they have contacts down in the Carolinas with them. GAIN has a warehouse out in Pennsylvania. So even though Feed My Starving and Samaritan's Purse don't know me, I know them, and they've given us tons of stuff that we've been able to mobilize and get over there. On the ground in Kenya is Dove Ministries. I'll share with you just a little bit about them because they have become our most recent indigenous ministry that helps us out the most by getting containers cleared, by helping distribute things such as food items, or when we have a lot of medical equipment, we'll send it out to different clinics. We've also been very much associated with another school there. Some of you may have heard the name Dr. Francis before. That's his school of ministry. We don't go there without visiting. Even though my group doesn't have anything specifically to do with that, we are all intertwined and have become friends, and it helps everybody out. And then there's multiple dispensaries and clinics throughout the country that we've been associated with. There is out in the village, there's actually still mud huts and villages, and we've helped with some dispensaries out in that area and try and supply them with things as they become available to us. So this is Ibrahim, the guy in the red, but that's a container that just was over a couple of years ago, and you can just get an idea of some of the items, the medical equipment off to the side, and then what happens, we get it over and then pretty much lay it in his lap, and then he helps us get it distributed. He's helped it to get to that point from the port. There's no way that us as Americans can get that from the port up to there logistically or financially without someone like this helping. So there's many hands involved to get the things where we need to get them. And he has multiple churches, not only in Kenya, Uganda, India, that he helps shepherd over. He and his wife are very involved in this ministry, but they try and also teach self-reliance and try and get those ministries to be able to self-sustain and take care of themselves. So a lot of farming, fish farming, things like that, and that's around his compound where he does a bunch of that. That's back to our area. Land has become very, very difficult in large cities. It becomes very expensive, and sometimes when I talk about the costs of like where our school sits, it's not much bigger than these two rooms combined, with the outskirts on the walls there. It becomes very, very expensive to buy property in a town like this because people move in from outside, and even the slums become compacted, and it's just very expensive. So we tried to help purchase some of this, and it's just very, very expensive to do that. So, like I said, then other things happen as a result of what we do. So even though we've done the medical and the school, other things happen. Sotani International is a board that I became involved in. It's a secular group that's out of Cincinnati that does AIDS work over in Kenya. Again, just by making ourselves open. So I serve with them, and they do work in villages out in the country. There's also a large African immigrant group here in Fort Wayne, and I've worked with them for the last 15, 16 years too, and they have a social agency and a way to try and help out people. And what's interesting with them is that even though it's an African immigrant thing, the main thing they ended up doing was teaching Burmese how to speak English as a second language. And then more recently, because of my association with my friends in Kenya, one of the surgeons there happened to originally been trained in Uganda, and a couple of years ago we went to Uganda and started up the same thing. So I don't know where that's going. I just try and keep my blinders on, because I'm worried we're going to start getting asked about more and more, and my wife hasn't given me clearance for all that yet. So, but actually, because of the strike that's going on in Kenya, we're going to go back to Uganda this summer. And this is just that group, and it's this guy right here who decided to also, based on his Christian faith, to give back and do some things. And so he asked if I would come join him. So we did. And that group right down there was the first time we went there. And the only thing I didn't know is, I knew this because we always speak of our faith when we go to Kenya, and I didn't know what in Uganda. I wasn't sure what it was going to be, and that was one of the things that was on my list. I told my wife before I left. I just said I just got to right away share who we are. Before I could even do that, the leader of their department gave his testimony, and I knew we were on solid ground. Wow. So I told you I would talk about the why and at the end, and I don't even know where I'm at time-wise. I'm done. Okay, so why? Okay, so this whole thing about being called, I didn't understand being called when I was younger, or maybe when I was or I couldn't hear it. I really truly believe in being called, and I think that it does happen. Those of you in ministry understand that. Those of you who have done other things, I know you understand that. So I love talking about that. Other people think we're crazy sometimes, but I truly believe I was called to what it is I'm doing. Everything we do, I see it as an outgrowth of my faith. We make that clear. We don't pick team members based on some litmus test. I don't care whether the people we take have faith or not. I love taking them. It's part of the fun. That's probably the biggest part of it, is that what we think we're going to do for them is way less than what we end up doing for those of us who go. And I know you know that from short-term missions. It's an individual decision. It doesn't matter where you're going, the distance, that's not part of it. It's just, for me, Kenya happened to be where I was called. And I don't say, oh, you have to travel. It doesn't have anything to do with the amount of miles that you go. But if you do feel that call, I encourage you to do it. There'll be confirmation, there'll be roadblocks. Sometimes those are the same things. Because you know that the enemy's going to set up roadblocks. If you're doing something that's on the path, there shall be roadblocks. There's supposed to be roadblocks, and if you accept those for what they are, then you understand that. But there's also been plenty of confirmation of that by friends, by things that I didn't even know I had in my past that were there, that then turned me on to go, got it. So I'm a big proponent of short-term mission trips. I know many of you have done that. I really think it's a great time to find your place and your perspective. And since I'm over the limit, I'll stop talking.
Let's thank Jerry.
Yeah.